Most places are built on solid ground. Roads connect them. Foundations anchor them. Land is assumed. But there are parts of the world where land stops being reliable, where water replaces streets, where ground shifts or disappears, and where entire settlements exist without ever fully touching earth. Once you see how these places function, the idea of what a city is starts to change. Where streets never existed. Arriving in Ganvie doesn't feel like entering a town. There are no roads, no sidewalks, no intersections. Everything happens on water. Here's the first shock. Movement replaces infrastructure. Boats act as streets. Docks replace doorsteps. Daily activity never reaches dry ground. This isn't a novelty. It's the base condition. What feels immediately disorienting is the absence of fixed pathways. In Ganvie, located on Lake Nokoué in Benin, over 20,000 people navigate daily life entirely by canoe. Children paddle to school. Merchants transport goods between floating markets. Even social visits require watercraft. And once you notice that reversal, the concept of a neighborhood fundamentally shifts. When land becomes temporary. On Lake Titicaca, floating islands drift quietly. The surface compresses slightly when you step on it. Here's what feels unsettling. The ground beneath you isn't fixed. These islands are rebuilt constantly. Materials decay and are replaced. Stability comes from maintenance, not permanence. Land here isn't something you own. It's something you keep alive. The Uros people construct these islands from totora reeds, layer upon layer, stacked and interwoven until they form a platform thick enough to support homes, cooking fires, and entire families. But the reeds decompose. Water saturates the lower layers. The islands gradually sink and soften. Here, land is a process, an ongoing negotiation with decay. And that quiet, repetitive labor, adding reeds, adjusting anchors, redistributing weight, is what keeps the ground solid enough to stand on. And then water stops being predictable, where the calendar is controlled by water. In Southeast Asia, the water level changes dramatically each year. In places like Tonle Sap, settlements rise and fall with the seasons. Here's the shock. Flooding isn't an emergency. It's expected. Homes float or stand on tall stilts. Movement adapts vertically. What feels like disaster elsewhere is simply timing here. During the dry season, Tonle Sap in Cambodia is a modest lake. Boats rest on muddy ground. Children play in areas that will soon be submerged. The water sits at a certain height, and life adjusts accordingly. Then the monsoon arrives. The shock isn't that flooding happens. It's that life continues without interruption, without panic, without the assumption that water is the disruption and land is the norm. Here, water is the norm. Land is the seasonal variation. If you're interested in places where geography sets the rules and modern systems don't fully apply, subscribe. This channel explores destinations that work under different conditions, where homes expect water to win. In villages like Kompong Phluk, buildings don't resist water. They accommodate it. Tall stilts lift structures far above seasonal floods. Ladders replace staircases. Movement assumes rising water. Here's what feels different. Nothing here is built to stay dry forever. The design accepts that water always returns. Walk through Kompong Phluk during the dry season, and the stilts seem absurdly tall. Homes sit 10, sometimes 15 meters above the ground. Ladders descend awkwardly into empty air. It feels overdone. Then the wet season arrives, and those same ladders dip directly into water. Boats pull up where dirt once was. The height that seemed excessive becomes necessary. What's striking is the lack of compromise. These aren't homes built with flooding as an unfortunate possibility. They're designed with flooding as the starting point. The architecture doesn't hope water stays away. It assumes water will always come back and plans accordingly. Even the materials reflect this. Wood weathers but doesn't corrode. Interiors are kept minimal. Few possessions that can't be moved quickly if water rises higher than expected. The relationship with belongings changes when you know that elevation, not walls, is what keeps things dry. There's a certain honesty in the design. No pretense that humans control the water. Just an acknowledgement that they can control their response to it. When the ocean replaces the map. Further south, the land itself becomes optional. Across parts of Southeast Asia, the sea functions as living space. This is where groups like the Beijo exist. Here's the quiet shock. The ocean isn't crossed, it's occupied. Movement doesn't rely on addresses. Navigation replaces location. Anchoring replaces stopping. The map feels less relevant here. For the Beijo people, often called sea nomads, the ocean isn't a barrier between destinations. It's the destination itself. Entire lifetimes unfold on the water. Homes are built on boats or stilted platforms anchored in shallow coastal areas. Children learn to swim before they learn to walk on solid ground. What becomes immediately clear is the absence of fixed reference points. There are no street names, no postal codes, no sense of returning home to a specific, unchanging location. Home is wherever the boat is anchored. Community is wherever other boats cluster nearby. This creates a relationship with space that's fundamentally fluid. Addresses assume permanence. But when your home can move, the concept of a fixed location loses meaning. You don't live at a place. You live on the water, and the water is everywhere. Even language reflects this. Directions aren't given in distances or landmarks. They're given in tides, currents, and wind patterns. The environment itself becomes the coordinate system. And once you understand that navigation replaces addresses, the ocean stops feeling like empty space. It becomes densely populated, just in a way that refuses to appear on traditional maps, where water removes safety nets. In Lagos, Nigeria, Makoko sits entirely above water. Homes rest on stilts. Movement happens by canoe. Infrastructure is minimal. Here's what feels uncomfortable. There's no buffer zone, no roads, no backup routes, no separation from the water. Life continues here not because conditions are ideal, but because adaptation never stops. Makoko operates without the redundancies most cities take for granted. There's no secondary route if the canoe path is blocked. No alternative infrastructure if the water rises unexpectedly. No emergency services that can easily reach every home. The settlement exists in a constant state of improvisation. Wooden planks form narrow walkways that sway underfoot. Electrical wires hang loosely between structures, spliced and respliced as needs change. Waste management, water supply, and sanitation all require creative solutions that wouldn't pass any formal inspection. Yet tens of thousands of people live here. They work, raise families, build businesses, all while navigating an environment that offers no guarantees. Why water settlements feel unsettling? Modern cities rely on control. Water removes that. It rises, it shifts, it ignores boundaries. That's why these places feel unfamiliar. They don't dominate the environment. They adjust to it, constantly. And once you notice that, solid ground starts to feel less guaranteed than you assumed. Most urban planning begins with the assumption that the environment can be managed. Rivers are channeled, wetlands are drained, coastlines are reinforced. The goal is always the same: make the land stable, predictable, controllable. Water settlements operate under the opposite assumption. They accept that water cannot be controlled, only accommodated. Homes flex with floods. Communities relocate with seasons. Infrastructure remains temporary because permanence is impossible. This creates a psychological shift. In most cities, you trust the ground beneath you. You assume roads will remain passable, that foundations won't shift, that the landscape will stay essentially the same. In water settlements, that trust doesn't exist. The environment is always in flux, and the people living there don't fight that reality. They build their lives around it. What feels unsettling is the absence of certainty, the quiet acknowledgement that nature sets the terms, and humans simply respond. There's no illusion of control, just adaptation, repeated endlessly, without any promise that tomorrow will resemble today. And once you've seen that returning to solid ground doesn't feel quite as solid as it used to, these places aren't built near water, they're built with it. No roads, no fixed ground, no promise of stillness. Yet daily life continues, quietly, deliberately, without spectacle. If this video changed how you think about where cities can exist, subscribe. Because some of the most unexpected places to visit aren't built on land at all. They float, adapt, and endure.